What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be talking about 10 American stereotypes I believed before visiting as a European. This is by Lucille. So if you enjoyed today's content, don't forget to check out her channel. I will have the link in the description down below for you guys. Let's check it out. Thank you so much for watching.
I'm French, and like many Europeans, I had a bunch of preconceived ideas about the US before I actually visited, and I have to admit that some were totally ridiculous, but some others actually turned out to be true. So let's explore that together, starting with the first stereotype I had, which is that Americans are very patriotic. So yes, as a European, when I first arrived, I was so surprised by how many American flags there were in the street. Like, it's not really a thing in France, like people don't fly French flags in their front lawn. It's seen as being a bit weird, but on my side, as someone who loves cultures, I'm really into it. You know, I really like the 4th of July decor, especially in the suburbs of Chicago where my boyfriend is from. It is so cool and really gets me in a patriotic mood, even though I'm not from the US. But it's not only that, like people really...
So she's not too far from me. She's in Chicago. I'm about 2 hours away from her. But yeah, the American flag flying has been a huge thing since I've been an itty bitty girl. More so when I was little than now. And it is still pretty big now. So yeah, always been a big thing.
We take the national anthem very seriously, like standing up at sports events. And Bobby told me that growing up, he had to say the Pledge of Allegiance every single day at school. So it definitely feels overall like a more patriotic experience than what I...
That is very true. And I did too. Only up until like, gosh, I think I remember doing it in 3rd grade. And then, they got into the whole controversy about the word God in it, and so we stopped doing it, pulled Bibles out of schools, and here we are.
I've lived personally. But I just want to say that it's also very polarized. Like, Americans themselves have very strong opinions about their country, and I've met a lot of people who are very apologetic for being American, and this is maybe linked to the other stereotypes we're gonna talk about in a bit. But I feel it's such a shame that these people feel the need to do that, because I feel the US is a really great place to be from. And you know, obviously, like in every country, there are good things and bad things, but in my personal opinion, and I've lived and worked in the US, I've been to 15 states, but I've also lived in 8 different countries. Wow. I can say that the US is a really great place to be from. But another funny side of this...
And another really great place to be from is France. I've been learning a lot about France lately, and her country is amazing.
Stereotype is sometimes some people have a tendency to see the US as the center of the world. Like, for example, you know, thinking you can pay in dollars in Paris. And obviously do not do that. If someone accepts your dollars in Paris, they don't have good intentions and you're probably being overcharged. And in general, you should always read up about a country before visiting. Things are gonna be very different from where you're from. And obviously not everyone is like that. If you're on this channel, you're probably really interested in cultures and you're trying your best to adapt, as I can see with all the really cool comments you're leaving on my videos. But this leads me to my second stereotype, which is Americans are supposedly bad at geography. By now, we've all seen these YouTube videos of people...
Is it how did she say it?
Are supposedly bad at geography. By now...
Geography is how I've always... That was cute.
We've all seen these YouTube videos of people asking Americans to name a country, any country, just name a country. And obviously these videos play into the stereotypes. They're also cherry-picked. And I'm sure that if you shoved a camera on my face and yelled at me, I will forget all the countries. But since it's a light video and it's about my personal opinion on these stereotypes, I have to tell you about something weird that keeps happening to me in the US. And you know, maybe you have an opinion on that. So I'm from France and I grew up right there. And my dad is from Spain, the country in Europe that's right there. And sometimes this comes up in conversations, like for example, if we're talking about our origins with people. And in the US, for whatever reason, people misunderstand or don't remember correctly and think I'm from Mexico. And I love Mexico. I think it's a great country. I spent a lot of time there during my travels. I've actually lived there for 6 months, but I am not from Mexico. I'm literally from the other side of the...
Oh, Charlie and I were just talking about this. Some people don't have the ear for it, like me. I just don't have the ear for like hearing and knowing the culture or the it's weird.
The pond. Like, it's a 10-hour flight to go from Paris to Mexico. And this has led to very awkward situation, especially at work, with people going out of their way to be nice and introducing me as Mexican to actual Mexican people who are like, oh cool, which part of Mexico are you from? And I'm like, France. And the people who forget where I'm from are very educated, they're trying to be nice, and I've never understood why this happens so often and why it's always Mexico and not, for example, Canada, where they also speak French. But I feel at this point it's not even a question of geography, but more of listening when people tell you where they're from. And also,
Maybe.
I do feel that it's normal that some Americans don't know about every single European country. Like, the US is such a big country. There are many states already to remember. So I don't expect people to know about the exact place.
Oh, and just so you guys know, this right here's where I live in America, good old Indiana. If you've heard about it, it is it's a lot of stuff going on in Indiana. We'll just say that.
Many states are ready to remember, so I don't expect people to know about the exact place I'm from, because I personally don't know every single place in the US either. Also in Europe, where countries are very tiny and close to each other, like France is roughly the size of Texas, but there's also, for example, Monaco, which is the size of Central Park in New York. And Europeans also generalize the US too. Like, one of my European pet peeves is when people have very strong opinions about the US for no reason, even though they've never been there. And this is because US politics are very discussed by international media. Also, American movies and American companies are everywhere, but they are not representative of the American culture as a whole. Like, you can't have an educated point of view about the whole American culture just by watching Home Alone, for example. And this stereotype is also linked to the next one, which is that Americans don't travel. And I have to say that this one is entirely not true. You've probably heard the myth that only 10% of Americans have passports. Well, apparently this has not been true for over 20 years. And apparently 3/4 of Americans have visited at least another country. So Americans are going...
3/4 of Americans have visited other countries. Wow. That's a lot more than I thought. A lot more.
abroad, they're just visiting fewer countries than us Europeans. Roughly 1/4 of Americans have been to 5 or more countries, when in France that number is 54%. And in smaller European countries like the Netherlands, it's 83%. And that fully makes sense because there's two factors at play in international travel, which are basically how much money you have, because flights and hotels are expensive, but also how close you are to another country. Like, if we take the example of the Netherlands, you could technically bike to Belgium. It's super close. Also, in the US, flights tend to be pretty expensive because you're pretty far away from other countries. Like, your only neighbors are Canada and Mexico, and the US is so massive.
And Greenland.
That a lot of people prefer to travel domestically. Like, there's already so much to do in the US. Like, the nature is very diverse, there's a lot of really cool regional cultures, and also things are very, very far away from each other. Like, for example, Barcelona in Spain is a very common weekend trip from where I grew up in France. It's roughly a 4-hour drive. In New York City, where I used to live, the same amount of driving only got me to Italy in New York State, which is in a very beautiful region and has really nice nature, really cool hikes, but obviously it's not another country. And another stereotype I had before going to the US is that Americans don't speak any other languages than English. And this one is not entirely true. Like, the US is a country that has been built on immigration, and around 1 in 5 Americans speaks a different language at home. But even if you're not already bilingual, it's never too late to start learning a new language with today's partner, Rosetta Stone. Rosetta Stone is an immersive language learning app that uses pictures, audio, and native pronunciation tools to help you confidently speak a new language as if it were your first. All their lessons are themed and built to immerse you in real-world situations you'd actually encounter. Also, they have this really cool voice recognition feature called True Accent, and it listens to your pronunciation and gives you feedbacks so that you can sound more like a native speaker. At the moment, Rosetta Stone is offering 60% off their lifetime unlimited language subscription, giving you access to all 25 of their languages for life with just one payment. So if you've been waiting for the right moment to learn a language, you should click the link in the description below. Alright, so this next one is a bit weird, but another thing I've been warned of before going to the US is medical expenses. Like, I've literally been told, be careful to not break a leg in the US. Otherwise, you'll be in debt. And given current events, it seems like a really big issue. But luckily for me, I haven't broken anything. And the only medical emergency I had while living in the US was an ear infection. And obviously, ear infections are not life-threatening. But if you've ever had one, it hurts so bad that you're ready to do anything to make it stop. And on my side, I went to an urgent care facility where I saw a doctor, and it costed me $300. Luckily, my health insurance was very good at the time because I was working for a French company in the US. So I had to pay out of pocket, and then I was reimbursed. But in the time it took for me to get reimbursed, I was very scared that my claim was going to be denied or that I would not be reimbursed in full. And to be honest, $300 is a lot of money for an ear infection. If we compare that to my most recent ear infection, and I have sensitive ears, okay, which was in Paris, I had to pay $0 out of pocket. Like, they didn't even ask to see my credit card. They only needed my health insurance card. If I had to pay out of pocket, it would have been 25 euros, which is around $26. So it is very, very cheap to see a doctor in France. And it's pretty easy to get an appointment for everyday stuff. Obviously, our system is not.
That's going to be my big thing if I ever move to a different country, is healthcare. Like, I don't have healthcare right now, and it is crippling me. It really is. But, yeah, that sucks.
Perfect, but I feel it's a pretty good one. I've never had any kind of medical stress in France. And obviously in the US, this stereotype varies quite a lot depending on your health insurance plan, because it depends of your employer. And I've really seen both ends of the spectrum, like from people who didn't have dental and couldn't afford to get dental care, which really sucks. Like, it's so painful. On the opposite end of the spectrum, I've seen like stuff that's not very necessary being reimbursed. Like, recently I was talking with my friends about this clinic that gives you a Chanel goodie bag after you give birth. So yeah, not very necessary. I'd rather not pay $300 if I have an ear infection. But yeah, overall, I feel very grateful that I've always been super healthy. My family and all my loved ones have been very healthy, so I haven't tested extensively any medical system. And if you have and you want to share your experience, feel free to leave me a comment. Another thing I believe about the US is that people sue each other for no reason. Alright, I know this one is a bit of a weird one, but from a European perspective, it seems like the US is like the Wild West of lawsuits. Like, just driving on the highway, you see a bunch of like personal injury lawyers. You have to sign release forms all the time. And you hear about those crazy viral lawsuits. And here I can't talk about that without talking about what happened to this poor old lady that had to be hospitalized for 8 days after spilling McDonald's coffee on her lap. Like, I've seen the picture, and what happened to this lady was really horrible. She had third-degree burns, and she decided to sue McDonald's to pay for her medical bills. That's just what she was asking for. The title of the New York Times documentary I watched about it sums it best: burned by hot coffee, then by the media. Like, she was painted by the news as just a dumb lawsuit that was fully useless. ABC News even called it the poster child of excessive lawsuits. And from a European perspective, that's just what I heard. I actually didn't know what happened to this lady, and obviously hadn't seen the pictures, which are awful. So I feel this stereotypes comes from extreme cases that were very publicized, and in reality things are a bit more nuanced. Like, I feel suing for medical bills is totally understandable, and seriously, the very few people I know that have been involved in a lawsuit, it has been for a very good reason. So I don't think suing people qualifies as an American hobby. I don't know, and I don't want to know.
I'm sure somebody has a hobby in America. I'm almost positive. It's been, I mean, just from all the lawsuits and stuff, the jobs that I've had is very, like, I have worked at a place in the wintertime when it snowed. Like, they were like every 5 minutes, like, they were crazy about going out there and salting the sidewalks, because a year before that someone fell and sued the place when it wasn't even really their fault. But she became a freaking psycho about it, and that's how it starts. That's where the craziness. That's where it starts.
I'm not a lawyer, I've never been involved in any lawsuits, and I intend for things to stay this way. Alright, so this is supposed to be a light video, and recently in my recommended, I've had a lot of videos of Italians trying Olive Garden. And you know, as you could expect, their reactions are not very good, they are very scared to go there, they don't really like the food, and overall they find the experience very bland and inauthentic. And that's often how Europeans tend to perceive American food. And I have to admit that I did believe that before I
Italians are very, 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 very picky about their food. If they're saying it's authentic, it better be authentic. Like, I guarantee that guy did not think Olive Garden was an Italian place.
visited the US, but luckily I was proven entirely wrong. The US is a massive country with a very rich food culture that varies from state to state, and I have to say that this stereotype is absolutely untrue. I feel this bad image stems from the fact that our only contact with American food in Europe are the big fast food chains. Like, for example, I used to have a terrible image of fried chicken because I only knew about KFC and it didn't look really good to me. Like, I thought this was pure junk food and I was not really willing to try it. I usually don't really like big chains because I prefer to go to small shops. But a few years ago, my American boyfriend actually brought me to Atlanta, Georgia to go to one of the best fried chicken restaurants in the world. And there we actually met the chef who told us about the recipe that hasn't changed since 1945. And like, they really put so much love and care into it. Like, they marinate the chicken overnight. It's super juicy and tasty, and they serve it with really delicious sides. And since then, I've been such a big fan of fried chicken and southern food in general.
What, baby? Love you.
Even love chicken and waffles, which is another food that would send Europeans into a coma, but it's so good. And I feel that in general, the US does comfort food so well. And there are so many small businesses that are not owned by big corporations. And I feel you obviously shouldn't rule out American food just because you've seen McDonald's or KFC. Like, it's really my pet peeve when Europeans say the food is not tasty in the US, because not only there's really good American foods, but there's also food from all over the world. Like, for example, in New York, I've tried really authentic Malaysian food, Indian food, Indonesian food, and all of these foods, they're made very authentically. Like, they keep the recipes the same as at home, and they often import some spices or products. Stereotype number 8 is that people love to work. And obviously I'm French, so it comes to no surprise to you that people have a lot of vacation time in France, but that's one image I had of Americans. And I do feel this one is kind of true. Like, there is this always on mentality where people are always thinking about business or maybe building side hustles and always trying to make things happen. And obviously sometimes it's a necessity. Like, people who have several jobs, they don't always do that because they love it. Like, they need to pay rent. But there is more of a focus in the US in having a side hustle, monetizing your passions, whereas
you have to have a side hustle or you're just not going to make it.
In France, I know a lot of people, for example, who are very good at a skill like art, but just do that in private and will never think of monetizing anything. And this also ties up with stereotype number 9, which is that Americans are very optimistic and outgoing. And that's a thing that I had to adapt to in the US because it's not in my culture, but now I really love small talk. I love how positive people are, and I've already talked about it in the other video I made about the US, but that's something that makes daily life a bit nicer. And honestly, I feel like this outgoing energy is reflected everywhere, which leads me to my next stereotype that everything is big in the US. This one, coming from a European perspective, is entirely true. The highways are massive, the cars are very big, the portion sizes are massive, although now I'm used to it and I really like it. And one thing that's for sure massive in the US is the distances. The US is such a big country, and recently I crossed it from New York to SF by train, and it took me 3 days. I also made a video about my thoughts, and I think you should watch it next. I'll see you there.
That was a good video. I really enjoyed that. If you guys did too, make sure you subscribe like I just did. Heck yeah. Lucille, thank you so much for the video. I really enjoyed that. That was cool. Guys, if you enjoyed today's content, don't forget to like, subscribe. It really helps the channel grow, and I really appreciate it. If there's anything you want to add in the comments, go ahead and do that, and I will see you there. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.